No, I guess tomorrow.
Alright.
I want to fix it.
Oh, there we are. Okay, we are live. All right, welcome folks to the December edition of Outspoken. Let me turn this down a little. My name is Greg Newton. I'm the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum. And tonight we have our volunteer, Sylvia Epstein, who's helping us out. Thank you very much. The Bureau is an all-volunteer queer bookstore, independent. We have been in existence since 2012, and we've been here at the center since 2014. So as an all-volunteer bookstore, we always ask for donations, especially from those who will not be buying books. If you know you won't be buying books, we ask you to throw something in if you're able to. There's also a Venmo code on the back and some cash in here, some change. And those of you watching online, you can also make a donation on Venmo if you like. Just look for BGSQD. All right.
I'm going to be, hey, Carol.
Welcome. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that on our website, bgsqd.com, or by the register. And if you're not, what else did I want to say? Oh, our regular business hours are Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later when we have events such as this. And we have one more event this calendar year, which is on Saturday, and that is Tell, our storytelling night that we've been hosting for over 10 years. Looks like Christian has joined us. Okay, so before we get started, I just wanted to read a land acknowledgement and a statement of solidarity with the people of Palestine. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in making a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a queer issue. As queer people, we know the pain of being cast out. We have been and continue to be despised by many, including our own parents, families, and communities of origin. This reality evokes in many of us a deep empathy with others who are likewise seen not as fully human, but as problems to be solved, questions for which the answer is ultimately elimination and erasure. As we watch the ongoing genocide of Palestinians by the State of Israel, carried out with the full support of our government and funded by our tax dollars, we witness the inevitable results of defining a people solely as a threat to the safety and well-being of those deemed inherently worthy of life. This horror compels us to speak out not only against the current bombardment and siege of Gaza by the State of Israel, but against the historical and ongoing violent displacement of Palestinians by Zionists and the conditions of occupation and apartheid under which Palestinians have been forced to live for over 75 years. In our longing for a very different reality, we take inspiration from the words of Jose Esteban Munoz, who wrote, "Queerness is essentially about the rejection of a here and now, and an insistence on potentiality or concrete possibility for another world," which is from his 2009 book, Cruising Utopia. So without further ado, please welcome Rob Burns of the Publishing Triangle.
Thanks, Greg. I'm really excited about this lineup tonight. And unfortunately, two readers who I put at the end of the lineup because they were both going to read Christmas-themed queer stories are not going to be with us tonight for different reasons. But I do want to acknowledge Nathan Burgoyne. Oh, and by the way, both of them have fans in the audience. So not that they would be here in person because one's coming from Ottawa and the other from Boston. But still, I want to acknowledge Nathan Burgoyne, whose new collection of stories, Upon the Midnight Queer, it was published last month. And will be, you know what? It'll be timely next year too, won't it? And my good friend Fiona Riley from Boston, who she's part of the she's part of a collection of novellas along with Georgia Beers, who will be joining us next month, by the way, and Maggie Cummings, called All I Want for Christmas. So lesbian Christmas stories, gay Christmas stories, fantasy Christmas stories, buy them up. But let's get to the program right now, except for first, sorry, I always take things out of order. Let me acknowledge Carol Rosenfeld, the chair of the Publishing Triangle, who's back in the audience. And let's kick off the program now with Joy Layton. Joy Layton is the author of 3 books about trans and non-binary identities. Once Out of Nature, the National Jewish Book Award finalist, Through the Door of Life, and the Publishing Triangle Award finalist, The Soul of the Stranger, and 11 books of poetry, including the recently published Family and National Jewish Book Award winner, The Book of Anna. Please welcome Joy Layton.
Thank you so much.
Camera around so you can see an audience.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Other people. Hi, thank you all for coming. Thank you so much to the Bureau of General Services Queer Division for hosting this, and of course for the Publishing Triangle for making it possible. Am I audible?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to read an excerpt from each of the books that came out in September. I'm going to start with Once Out of Nature, which is a collection of selected essays on the transformation of gender. And I'm going to read from the introduction, which is a little as drier than the essays are, but does lay out the perspective that's behind them. What does it mean to live in a world in which gender is visibly, rapidly changing? How can we understand ourselves and be understood by one another when familiar terms like man and woman mean different things to different people, and when some people don't identify in familiar terms at all? How do we live, love, and work with those whose identities don't make sense to us, or who identify us in ways that contradict our sense of who we are? Even though, as an openly trans person, I'm one of the people sparking these questions, I wrestle with them too. Since I began living as myself, living the female gender identification I hid for decades behind a male persona that fit the body I was born into, I've devoted much of my time to trying to understand how trans and non-binary identities relate to more traditional ways of doing gender, and to exploring how recognition of these identities is changing gender for everyone. Like many of us, I've been bruised by the often brutal arguments between people who do gender differently from one another. Like many of us, I long for alternatives to what those arguments pose as an either-or choice between a world that has no place for anyone who can't fit binary gender and a world in which gender has fragmented into a whirl of different beliefs, terms, and ways of life. As a trans person living in an often hostile binary world, I understand how hard it can be to engage with those whose ideas of gender conflict with our own. It's lonely when those around me don't share my understanding of gender, and painful to relate to those who don't accept my identity. But though we often focus on how individuals identify, even the most individual forms of gender are inherently social, ways of identifying ourselves and others that, when gender works for us, enable us to feel seen, understood, connected. Accepting that others understand gender differently means accepting that others may not see us as we see ourselves, and that we may not see others, including close family members, as they see themselves. So it isn't surprising that no matter where we fall on the political, cultural, or gender spectrums, many of us fear that others' ways of doing gender threaten our communities, our relationships, our very sense of who we are. Our shared anxieties could inspire us to think together about how to make the best of a world in which gender is no longer a set of shared assumptions and means different things to different people. But instead, our fears of losing the forms of gender that feel true to us are making it harder and harder to engage respectfully and constructively with those who practice gender in other ways. At a time when assaults on trans and non-binary people are multiplying and the floodgates are about to be opened, it may seem foolish to focus on fostering mutual understanding instead of fighting for civil rights and basic needs. I wouldn't have the stability and safety to do this work if innumerable trans activists, from pioneers such as Victoria Cruz, Marsha P. Johnson, and Sylvia Rivera, to contemporary leaders such as Pauline Park, Kiara St. James, and Laverne Cox, hadn't put their lives on the line for decades to make the world livable for people like me. Without such efforts, my gender transition in 2007 would have likely cost me my teaching position at Orthodox Jewish Yeshiva University. Instead of writing essays and giving talks with the status and security of a tenured professor, I, like so many trans and non-binary people, would have had to struggle to find employment and might not well have not survived at all. But even as I watched the backlash against trans rights from the relative safety of my white, educated, middle class, blue state bubble, it seems clear to me that fostering understanding is also an essential form of activism. Trans rights and trans and non binary lives won't be secure as long as many non trans people fear that our identities and rights, our ability to be and live as who we are, come at the cost of theirs, and worry that by being and living as who we are, we threaten the binary forms of gender on which their families, communities, religious traditions, and ways of life depend. The more afraid we are that our ways of understanding gender, and thus our ways of life, are under attack, the harder it becomes to understand others' ways, or to see the fundamental human needs for recognition and relationship that we all share and look to gender to fulfill. It isn't easy to simultaneously live one's gender and try to understand how it seems to those who do gender differently. For many non-trans people, it's hard to think about their ways of doing gender at all. But for most trans and non-binary people, this kind of thinking is a condition of existence. When we live in the closet, we have to think constantly about how our sense of who we are differs from how the binary world sees us, so that we can hide what might betray who we really are. After we come out, we have to keep thinking about how our ways of living our gender seem from a binary perspective, because our jobs, housing, and safety depend on how non-trans people see us. For example, when I returned to teaching after my transition, I realized my work as a teacher now required me to understand how my Orthodox Jewish students saw me, the first openly trans person most of them had ever encountered. Some told me they'd been warned away from me by rabbis and parents. Some found my gender so disturbing they struggled to listen to what I said in class. Most, sooner or later, tried to ignore my gender and focus on their studies. To minimize the obstacles my being trans might present to them, I thought about everything I said in class of how it would sound to them, a discipline that forced me to recognize my students' own complex relations to binary gender and the conflicting forms, religious and secular, modern and pre-modern, that they had to navigate in order to live as both Orthodox Jewish and contemporary American women. My classroom experience has taught me that despite the conflicts that arise, people who understand gender in very different ways can work, live, grow, and learn together while remaining true to our sense of who we are. And I hope this book will help us do so because all of our lives depend on it. Thank you.
That was great, powerful. And I am so glad that Joy and I have spent the last 6 months, I believe, trying to put a date together. So I'm glad we got you here, and we'll have you back. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I forgot, I'm sorry. In the spirit, I paid $249 for this, so Dwayne Reed today. Wait a minute, hold on, gotta get the, is it right here?
Where's the hair and makeup?
Oh, never mind, anyway.
You look great.
And of course, so taken away with Joy's piece that I forgot to bring my notes up. But let me add though, actually, Joy's, the piece Joy just read for us reminds me that the reason we have these readings is to bring voices, emerging voices, established voices, to bring them out and give them give our writers publicity, to give them their time. We are looking for every stripe of the rainbow, and we're looking for everyone no matter where their career is, from the people that are just starting to publish to some of our community's most established writers. And so, we want to, I hope every month you see a wide array of members of the community, members of the queer writing community here at this event. How does Santa do this? Anyway, Michael McCune Bondas is an Irish-American writer. His books include Divining Bones and All the Heat We Could Carry. He's the winner, which was the winner of the Tom Gunn Award, which the Publishing Triangle gives out for gay poetry back in 2013, was it, Michael? 14. Oh yeah, of course, published in 2013, given in 2014. His work has appeared in Poetry Ireland Review, Hotel America, Court Green, Hayden's Ferry Review, Diode, and Coppernickel. He's received fellowships from the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, the Sundress Academy for the Arts, the Tyrone Guthrie Center in Ireland, and the Hawthornden Castle International Retreat for Writers in the UK. He teaches at Raritan Valley Community College and lives in the best place to live, I gotta say. I'm giving up where I live. Jersey City, New Jersey. Oops. Please welcome Michael McCune Bondas.
Thank you, Rob. How are you doing this? Okay, here we go. So I'm going to play against expectation a little bit and actually read an excerpt from an essay, which was written in response to essentially growing up in what I would call a Virgin Mary cult. My family went to a place in Yugoslavia called Medjugorje when I was in 3rd grade because of alleged Marian apparitions taking place there. We did that trip, we came home, and my family went crazy. I was 8 years old, and here's an excerpt from an essay I wrote about it. The pressure to be one of God's special children made me paranoid. I became obsessed with the idea of selling my soul to the devil. It was the last thing I wanted to do, but the urge would manifest constantly as an intrusive thought. An idle wish for something small, like a bag of Doritos, would enter my head, and a voice that seemed to come from within and without at the same time would whisper, "Would you sell your soul for a bag of Doritos?" If I even thought the word yes, that would be enough to damn me for all eternity. Having absorbed countless warnings about the devil's stealthy ways, I couldn't bring myself to dismiss these impulses. They tormented me. I kept imagining myself losing my soul at the age of 10 and then spending the rest of my life waiting to go to hell. Of course, there was always confession, but I knew my parish priest. How could I explain to a man I saw every weekend that I thought I might have sold my soul for Doritos or a Nintendo game? And even if I could push through that embarrassment, Satan would be waiting to pounce again the instant I left the confessional. If I didn't want to spend the next 70 plus years waiting to be damned, then I'd have to spend the next 70 plus years watching every thought and deed. I certainly didn't want to do that, but if this was the sacrifice I needed to make in order to please God and secure my place in heaven, what choice did I have? The mere fact that I wasn't zealously embracing the task of purifying my thoughts was enough to send me into a spiral of self-recrimination. My mother alternated between correctly believing that I was overthinking and less helpfully believing that the devil was probably antagonizing me the way he did the saints because I was a special soul. As long as I stayed close to Mother Mary and Jesus in the Eucharist, I'd be fine. This confirmed my worst fear, other than damnation. I had to maintain that agonizing Medjugorje mindset, or else I'd be rendered defenseless before the powers of hell. To protect myself from intrusive thoughts, I developed OCD-like rituals. Whenever the voice asked me if I would sell my soul for a video game or a Dorito or a night of no homework, I'd mentally say no, and then to drown out the perverse impulse to mentally say actually yes, I would crowd my thoughts with a garbled prayer, often worded in a weirdly compulsive, prattly sing-song way, like, no, I will not sell my soul to the devil in the name of Jesus Christ, who rules forever and ever, amen, thank you Jesus, thank you Blessed Mother, thank you God. Sometimes a snatch of music, either from church or a commercial, would find its way in as well, so that I'd be mentally praying and singing a hymn and the Kibbles and Bits jingle all at the same time. To seal the envelope on this strange muddle of a prayer, I'd make the sign of the cross. Often something inside me felt like the gesture didn't take, and I'd be compelled to repeatedly bless myself, something I had to do quickly when I was in public, lest people think I was weird. Though in my attempts to be stealthy, I wound up looking like I was having some kind of spasm. And I wasn't just worried about the state of my own soul. Although my mother made it clear that there was no expectation for me to flog myself or wear a camel hair shirt, there was pressure, sometimes explicit, always implicit, to perform small acts of self-denial. I'd be packing my lunch for the next day, and I'd get a sudden urge to munch a Dorito or two. The same voice that asked me if I'd sell my soul for a bag of Doritos would whisper in my ear that rather than eating the Dorito, I should abstain and offer up the sacrifice for the salvation of sinners. If I didn't, then somebody might go to hell for all eternity because I ate a Dorito. That these people had surely done awful things to deserve hell was beside the point. If I didn't give up the Dorito, I'd be giving up a chance for the dying sinner to have a deathbed conversion. The utter stupidity and irrationality of this thought process was not lost on me. I didn't dare tempt fate though, either my own or someone else's. It shouldn't be surprising that over time I began to fear the devil, not just as the subtle, invisible serpent hissing temptations in my ear, but as an embodied horror movie villain. I became fixated on the idea that I needed to protect myself and my family from demonic influence. This meant obsessively anointing myself, my bed, the floor, and various door frames with holy water. I didn't want to creep into the hall in the middle of the night to bless the entrances to my parents' and brother's rooms. I was afraid they'd catch me and think I was weird, even though I was just doing what God had commanded me to do. But the inner voice kept telling me that it was selfish to leave them open to demonic assault, just because I was worried about what they might think. And because it wasn't sinful to be, besides, wasn't it sinful to be ashamed of this kind of devotional behavior? If you deny God, God will deny you. At least the holy water I had stashed under my pillow was in a squirt bottle. That made it easy to anoint my family's door frames from a distance, minimizing the risk of creaky floors. Skipping some of it. I'd say I hit rock bottom with my compulsions on an overnight at a friend's house. The friend, Matt, was the son of two of my parents' prayer group friends. Mrs. B was warm and caring and had an easy laugh. She reminded me of my mother's best qualities. Her devotion to the Virgin Mary, while deep, always seemed more grounded. She was devout, but she was also practical, a woman who wore pants and took an interest in her kids' activities. When I played Little League, my mother would sit away from the stands in a cushioned lawn chair she'd brought from home and read religious books or quietly pray the rosary, only looking up when I was at bat. The other moms involved themselves in the game, cheering not just for their kids, but for their kids' teams. Mrs. B, I decided, was the kind of mother who would be in the stands with the other parents, rosary beads safely stowed in her purse. I don't remember the specifics, but I've been spontaneously invited to sleep over at Matt B's house. Because the overnight was so unexpected, I wondered if I'd somehow unknowingly sold my soul to the devil. You're spending the night with a friend, my mother sighed, exasperated when I shared my fears with her. Be joyous. At the time, I was reading the Bible and a few Lives of the Saints books. Even though I was just going for one night, I felt compelled to take all of my reading material with me. Leaving the Bible at home, thereby implicitly rejecting it, seemed like spiritual suicide. All of the saint books needed to come too. What would Saint Teresa think if I took Saint John Vianney but left her behind? But then there was the problem of how to carry the stack. The Bible was the largest book, but it seemed sacrilegious to put it on the bottom of the pile. Saints were secondary to the Bible, I arbitrarily reasoned, as I arranged 4 or 5 books of various shapes and sizes into a Jenga-like stack. When Matt saw me struggling with this precarious tower, he took the books from me and rearranged them. Bigger books on the bottom, he explained, like I was an idiot. I let him do it. If he pissed off God, that was his problem. In addition to the holy books, I brought my rosary beads and my holy water. I didn't want to drench my friend's bedroom with holy water, but again, my inner voice shamed me. If I didn't do an anointing, it was because I was embarrassed. But of course, deny God and God will deny you. If I believed that the holy water was necessary to protect myself and others at night, then it should make no difference where I was sleeping. Did I really want to expose my friend and his family to a satanic attack? And so I did it. Holy water on the mattress Mrs. B had pulled out for me to sleep on. Holy water on the carpet, holy water on the door frames. Mrs. B watched me go through this ritual, smiling politely. You forgot the most important place for holy water, she said, yourself. She and I anointed ourselves, and then she anointed Matt, much to his annoyance. The next day, back at home, my mother took me aside. Mrs. B is concerned. She said you were running around making the sign of the cross and holy water on door frames. I felt cold. I'd been worried about Matt's reaction, but not Mrs. B's. The whole foundation of our family's friendship was the Marian prayer group. Why would she find my behavior troublesome? Is she mad? I asked. I knew that didn't make any sense, but I was afraid to ask if she thought I was weird. No, she just wanted to make sure your father and I were aware of it, she sighed. You can't do things like that at other people's homes. They're going to think you're weird and you're not going to get invited to sleepovers. So skipping now to the end, I go through the whole thing and then the end, my wrap up. I emphatically refuse any well-meaning suggestions that going through this made me a better person. To say that I wouldn't be as compassionate or analytical if I hadn't experienced religious abuse, because that's what it was, is insulting. I'm writing this essay because I can see the clear genealogy between past and present, how trauma helped shape my consciousness for much of my life so far. It took reaching middle age and stubbornly choosing, time and again, to live life on my own terms to exorcise most of these demons. Medjugorje and its aftermath, my family, my own journey, maybe there are a few good things to take away from all of it. If there are any, I have no idea what they would be. And since I have a moment, I'm just going to read one very short poem, just to show you that, just to confirm that I did get through this. This poem is called X-Lube. He dips his hand in it, viscosity, like slurry jellyfish, proffers a fist, full of slick and stretchy sap. He uses to anoint the butt plug that resembles an ancient fertility goddess. My ass pulls in every slippery, outlandish thing he inserts. Serpent, club, sawtooth shark, fist of Orion. Fullness takes many forms. Afterward, I wipe myself, making sure to leave a rim of syrup, a ring of lube, touches of excess, aid to memory. Thank you.
Head back on. Thank you, Michael. Since it's not right, man, you just can't get good hats for $2.49 anymore. While we're talking about the Christmas spirit, remember 6 more shopping days, 5 more shopping days, really, right?
Yeah.
It's the 19th, so I mean, you're not gonna be here that day. You're not gonna be there the day before either, are you? Okay,
Yeah.
so when you're shopping for books, because that's what the people on your list want, go to independent bookstores, please, like the Bureau of General Services, or exactly the Bureau of General Services. Amazon doesn't need your money, and you know what? You give money to Jeff Bezos, and he just goes and spends it at Mar-a-Lago. So, all the more reason to shop independent. God, remember the good old days when Barnes and Noble was the problem? But anyway. Also, please consider becoming a member of the Publishing Triangle for $40 a year. I won't give you anything more than what you're getting for free, but you'll know that you're supporting those of us, the 7 members, is it? 9 members of the Publishing Triangle Steering Committee that serve as the board of directors and also serve as the staff. It is an all-volunteer organization. As you know, we run our annual award ceremony. This year we had a record number of submissions. And this is great, but again, everything we do is voluntary. So for your $40 goes a long way to help us continue to provide programs like this and the award ceremony, which is free, by the way, and will be held on April 17th. That's a Thursday this year at the New School on 12th Street in West 12th Street in Manhattan. So the ceremony's free, and we'll live stream it for free. And the reception afterwards is free. And that happens because of dedicated members of I sound like I'm doing a PBS pledge drive, but we have no tote bags. Our next reader will be Christian Baines. Christian is in his own description, let me add, an awkward nerd turned slightly less awkward author. Raised on dark humor and powered by New Zealand wine, he's the author of 6 novels, including gay paranormal series, The Arcadia Trust, and his magnum opus, My Cat's Guide to Online Dating, which is brilliant, by the way, you gotta read it. Born in Australia, he now travels the world whenever possible, and he's living and writing in Toronto, Canada, between trips. Please welcome my friend Christian Baines.
Need to unmute.
Sorry, I thought that was being. We're all good. All right. Thanks very much, Rob. Thank you so much for having me back. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for reminding me that I need to update my bio, which is now I think 8 books. Tonight I'm going to read from. I had a look through my catalog. I don't really have anything sort of jolly or Christmassy in that way, but in terms of the holidays, I tend to think of one important holiday tradition is always the ghost story. And earlier this year, we had a group of 10 queer male authors basically come together, and we each did a gay-themed ghost story, releasing a couple each week on the lead up to Halloween. So the collection is called Haunted Hearts. Each one has a cover in this style here. This is mine, Geistfleisch, which I'll be reading from this evening. So if you're looking for Christmas ghost stories, please feel free to check those out. But the one I'm reading from, Geistfleisch, is a period novel. It's set within Weimar, Germany, and it's from the perspective of Callum, who is a young working class man who has schemed his way to Berlin in the dying days of the Weimar Republic to experience a little bit of that sexual freedom that was afforded LGBTQ people for that brief, fantastic flash in time before everything went to hell. But Callum has a very special gift in that he is able to move between the realm of the living, and in one particular place, the realm of the dead, a bar that is entirely populated by ghosts of soldiers from World War One. What Callum does not have is money. So the chapter I'm going to read for you today is an opportunity presented to Callum to deal with the latter while his mind is still very much on the ghost bar. Callum slid his key into the lock and began trudging up the stairs to his apartment. Ah, Callum! Callum! The shout came from somewhere above him, followed by the thudding of feet on the wooden stairs. Victor. I've been waiting for you. I need a favor, but don't worry, there's good money in it. Callum was in no state to be doing anyone favors, but as he reached the door of his room, which might soon be locked to him if he failed to find some cash, he decided to at least hear the man out. Victor beamed at him, dressed in a string vest that showed off the muscles of the broad, hairy chest that dominated his short but athletic frame. Do you want to make 50 marks tonight? I'm in no mood for jokes, Victor. It's not a joke, Victor said defensively. A friend of mine saw you the last time we came here. He asked me, who is that handsome fellow? A friend? Callum asked. You mean a John? A what? Callum rolled his eyes. Not a chance. But I already told him you'd do it. You what? Piss off with you. Please, Callum. 100 marks then. Victor did sound desperate. I promise you'll like him. He's good looking, he's not much older than us, and he does all the work. He won't even fuck you if you don't want. You just have to relax and enjoy, and then 100 marks. Please. Please. If he's so good looking and nice, why don't you charge him 100 marks, Victor? I have other plans. And he wants you. The Englishman, he said, just this one time. Callum winced, asking himself if a month's rent in advance would wash away the taste of covering for a double-booked whore. He liked Victor, but bloody hell. After the night he'd had and what he'd seen, he remembered the smell of Ernst's charred body. He looked at his hands, where he'd cradled Max. They were clean. Perhaps it had all gone away once he'd left the place, faded like a forgotten nightmare, leaving Max and his comrades free to dance again. He couldn't take money for what he'd put them through, and he'd hate himself a lot less for whoring. There seemed barely a young German in Yukon who hadn't traded their flesh for some extra coin. Fine, he said. 100 marks, in advance. Thank you so much, Callum. I'm sure that won't be a problem. Victor threw his strong arms around Callum and wrapped him in a bear hug. Don't push it, Callum thought. He'd been told to expect his client at midnight, like a cheap children's tale turned tawdry panty dropper. Not wanting to risk his promised 100 marks, Callum had donned his tightest white undershirt, rolling up the already short sleeves to show off the muscles under his arms. He dropped for some press-ups and a few other exercises before getting dressed, and now lazed barefoot in the room's comfortable armchair, legs spread, a cigarette between his fingers waiting for midnight. Cinder-fucking-Rella he was not. His shoulders tensed as he heard the loud bang of the front door, followed by heavy, booted footsteps. Victor had given his client the front door key, better to avoid the prying eyes of their landlady, and it was not until the stranger reached Callum's door. Indeed, he'd watched that beautiful English boy disappear through it previously, that a sharp rapping of knuckles on wood replaced the footsteps. Come! Callum hoped he had the accent right. In stepped a tall man in a trim dark suit, carrying a matching overcoat. His smooth hair was slicked back with wax that made it impossible to be sure of its true colour, and a clean shave heightened his sharp cheekbones and jaw. He looked Callum up and down, first with scrutiny, then with unabashed admiration. Good Abend. I did not expect us to be speaking German. A faint rumble in his stomach reminded Callum he hadn't had dinner. Yes, that was absolutely the reason for it, no question. I haven't learned much, he admitted, suddenly aware of his cigarette and stubbing it out on the ashtray he'd forgotten to empty. His client smiled kindly. Good. I'm not paying for us to practice German. Callum nodded. What do you want to do then? And it's 100 marks. Up front, all right? The man fixed him with a side eye that somehow made him feel even more foolish. Victor was right. You've never done this before, have you? Callum couldn't deny the relief he felt at knowing Victor hadn't painted him as a regular colleague, but still. I know what I'm doing. The stranger took out his wallet and peeled out 3 crisp notes and held them out to Callum. 150. Then let's talk business, yes? Was he supposed to refuse the unexpected raise? Not bloody likely. The money felt crisp and clean, even as he slid it into his greasy pocket. Right then, what do you want? To see you, the man said with a smile. To start, anyway. It took Callum a moment to register the simple request, but he quickly peeled off his shirt and began unbuckling his trousers, wishing at once he'd chosen more flattering underwear, or none at all. The stranger circled him, inspecting his body in every detail, brushing Callum's modest but decent musculature with his fingertips. You play sports? Callum shrugged. A bit of football? Ah, the man's touch straight to the cleft of Callum's backside. Yes, that's clear. Callum heard the movement of cloth behind him before the man came back around front. Callum's jaw damn near fell from its joint. Victor had said nothing about his client having abs and pectorals chiseled straight off Mount Olympus. He shivered as the man stroked his cheek with those same cold fingers. I like to see men enjoying themselves, the man answered. I think you will. Yes? An awful thought invaded Callum's brain, punctuated with memories of the Saxon beauty who'd billed him the morning after, on his first week in Berlin. Was this man really going to pay him for sex? Victor was as hard up for money as anyone. He'd heard of fairies being sold out by jealous ex-lovers and others with secrets too big to risk. Victor would probably do it for a few lousy marks. And why was he doing this after what he'd just seen? The smell of burning flesh. The thought shorted his brain one after the other. I'm sorry, I can't. But you could take my 150 marks. Here. Callum fished them out, shaking his head. I'm sorry. And we have a deal. It's not about the money. Callum lowered his arm, breathing heavily. What? Show me your cock. When another moment's hesitation brought him no reprieve, Callum slid his underwear down, tugging several times on the flaccid meat that sprouted from a thatch of dark, ungroomed hair, trying to animate it. The man interrupted him. What's wrong? You don't like men? I do, he protested. Sorry, it's not you. I know that. The man rolled his shoulders, pushing out his powerful chest as he leaned back on Callum's bed, every muscle in his arms shaming Callum with its earnest showing off. Do you want to touch me? Swallowing his nerves, Callum accepted the invitation. But even the smooth flesh of the stranger's body couldn't wipe the image of broken, bullet-ridden forms from his mind. I can suck you off? Perhaps we should talk instead. I think, my friend, that my body is not the most extraordinary thing you've seen during your stay in Berlin. Feeling his throat tighten, Callum pulled his underwear back on. I think you should leave. Thank you very much.
Back with the hat. Thank you, Christian. Now that we're at the half point, excuse me, now that we're at the halfway point, let me just quickly, if I can find it, tell you now to put two things on your calendar. Excuse me. If I can find where I wrote, here it is. The last place you wrote. On Friday, January 24th, we're going to have the next Outspoken reading. We have 10 readers lined up that night. And listen to this lineup though. Michael Thomas Ford will be back. Donna Minkowitz, Carson Tate, Sean Stewart Ruff, C. Winter Hahn, Georgia Beers, Gar McVeigh Russell, Ann Laughlin, Chris Shirley, and Rob Osler. It happens to be, the MWA is in town, so that's why we've got an extra dose of mystery writers that night. But please do join us. And then, a week later, on Saturday, February 1st, we'll have a special tribute to Nikki Giovanni here that our colleague Emmanuel Xavier is putting together. And it's going to be an all-star cast of writers remembering and reading from the works of Nikki Giovanni. So please, you'll hear from us on that, but please do, like I said, mark your calendars for it. And but that reminds me, by the way, if you are not a subscriber to our newsletter that goes out every month, more or less on the 1st, sometimes 7th or 8th, depends. But write to us at publishingtriangle@gmail.com, and we will make sure to get you on the list. So you will know regularly then what we've got planned, and we encourage you to join us. And again, let me just emphasize, everything we do is free. Our award ceremony, our readings, our receptions, everything we do, it's all about spreading the word about the LGBTQ plus writing community and bringing more writers to more readers. So now on to, of course, now I just got myself, why didn't you stop me, Greg? Got myself all out of order. Our next reader, also joining us from Canada, was a big Canadian night here. It would have been bigger if Nathan Burgoyne was here, but Finian Burnett is an author who from British Columbia, is an author whose writing explores intersections of mental health, gender identity, disability, and life in a fat body. Their work has appeared on CBC Books, in Blank Spaces magazine, pulp literature, and more. I should also add, before finishing up on Finian's bio, if you're not Facebook friends with Finian, you are missing I laugh so much just reading their updates. That's, it's not hard to, become my friend. You just have to entertain me. And Finian does. But when not writing or teaching, Finian watches too much Star Trek and futilely tries to grow a garden. I feel your pain, Finian. Please welcome Finian Burnett.
Thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal night, and I really want to know what happens next in Christian's story. So that was an excellent reading. I write incredibly short stories. I write flash fiction, and because of that, I'm going to read a few short stories here, all of them under about 300 words. This is from my most recent collection, The Price of Cookies. It's called John Stanley Fixes Things. His face is soft like his mouth, his words. Long fingers knead the dough every morning, the strong muscles of his forearms flexing as he flips, pushes, slaps. I come for coffee. He opens early so I can get a cup before I open the shop. He sings and hums while he works, and the sound washes over me as warmly as the steam from my cup and the yeasty scent of fresh bread. He sings and he bakes, and I watch him move through the bakery. I watch that I'm helping. One day I sweep the walk while he finishes the baked apple tarts. Another, I close the shop early so I can stop in at the bakery and repair a loose plug. We're friends, I tell my wife when I'm spending more times at the bakery than I am at home. And he doesn't have any family, I say when she asks why he calls me every time something breaks. I fix things, I tell her. I'm the guy who fixes things. You know he's queer, she says, and I didn't know, but I don't care, I tell her. And I don't care, but I do care that his face is soft and his fingers are long and his voice wraps around me like the first whispers of spring. And the next time he calls me to fix something at the shop, I ask if I can kiss him and he says yes. Thank you. My next story is from my forthcoming short story collection, which is called Ravens Don't Have High Blood Pressure and Other Tales of Queer Love. And this is the title story from that. The ravens in the gas station parking lot are bigger than my cat, bigger than our neighbor's Jack Russell Terrier. Ravens are extremely smart, my wife says. They use tools and can imitate human speech. Last month, my doctor took a lump from my breast and sent it for lab testing. I read an article about a group of scientists who taught pigeons to spot cancerous tumors on pictures of biopsied tissue. My wife tells me ravens are adaptable to all kinds of different environments, which makes them far more likely to survive changing weather patterns than we are. If they're so smart, I wonder, why don't they use ravens? I stare at the one closest to our car. It struts with purpose like a fat man in a suit, walking with his hands in his pockets. Another raven lands on the gas pump with a French fry in its beak. Last week, my doctor told me to give up fried foods and spend more time on the treadmill. Ravens play, my wife says. They even make toys to play in groups. She touches my hand, tethering me to the world, though my heart is still with the birds. I obsess about my cancerous breasts and my unusual heart rhythms, and I watch the ravens as they play with each other and eat French fries and survive. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have then my next one is one called The Birthday Call. This is a nonfiction story, a 100-word story I wrote about my mother. My mother calls to wish me happy birthday at exactly 4:17 p.m., 50 years to the moment I was born. My mother calls on my birthday to tell me my older sister got her an Ancestry subscription and is helping to build a family tree. My mother calls me by my dead name and tells me about Granny, whose maiden name was Lovett. Granny left her husband, John Joseph Leaptrot, but he went by Jojo, and then she married Roscoe Davis, who was really Benjamin, but everyone called him Roscoe. My mother telephones on my birthday to call me a name I haven't used in 10 years and tells me my sister found a 1910 census and even Raymond is on it, though he was called Uncle Goo, and Caroline, though we called her Ducky. My mother calls to wish a happy birthday to a person who doesn't exist anymore and repeatedly calls me a name that doesn't fit because I'm sorry, she says, but I can't keep up with kids these days and their name changes. Thank you. My last one, I actually wrote this story for Rob because I did not have any seasonal stories at all. So I wanted to have something that was a Christmassy type story. This is called The Carolers. The carolers come at midnight and they don't show their faces. Horse skulls, Eric says the first night, peering through the sliver of exposed window where he'd pulled back the curtain. Horse skulls they're wearing, with ribbons. With ribbons, my daughter says, and she creeps toward the door. I want to see, she says, but her voice is strange and deep. Clara, no. Eric drops the curtain, races for the door, and grabs her by the waist. They're still singing, Johann says. They're still singing outside. His voice rises in fear as Clara struggles in her father's arms. Be still and hush, I say, wrapping my arms around my son. We all huddle in the living room, listening to cold, tinny voices. We know you're in there, someone says, and the voice is high-pitched and melodic. We know you're there, they sing, and someone else says, oh yes, we do. At daybreak, the singing stops and Eric peers out the window. No one's there, he says. They've gone. We open the front door to a pure blanket of snow, no footprints. No hoof prints, Clara says, and her voice still sounds far away like she's somehow gone with the singers, though her body is still in my arms. We sleep little, and at midnight the carolers come again, the people in horse masks. They have to be masked. They sing Christmas carols and gather outside our front door, and some of them circle the front of the house and stare at us through the window. A merriest of tidings, a harsh voice whispers, and it sounds as if it's at my neck. I whip around, but there's nothing, nothing but iciness in the air. We have to sing to them, Clara says, but hush, Eric tells her. On the third night, we wrap ourselves in quilts and wait for the singing, for the haunting lilt of the voices. They're here, Johann says, and now his voice is clear, his tone lifting in a cadence I've never heard before. Come sing with us, the voices outside say, and yes, yes, my son calls. The children walk toward the door as if in a dream. Eric, I scream, help me, stop them, but he's wrapped in the quilt. It covers his face as he thrashes. He can't breathe, I think, for a moment before racing for the door after my children, but the hallway has become impossibly long, longer than the house itself. We're coming with you, Johann says, stepping through the door, holding his sister's hand. On the fourth night, I sit on the couch waiting for the singers. At midnight, their voices come, and I listen. Do you hear it? I ask Eric. He doesn't answer, doesn't move from his cocoon in the quilt where he's been since the night before. The children are coming back, I whisper, and I listen to the voices, the deep basses, the altos, the choir of carolers, and in among them, two new voices, two sweet, sweet sopranos, lifting in song in the freshly falling snow. Don't do it, something inside of me screams, but I open the front door. Two small figures with skeletal horse faces and dark, hollow eyes lift their arms to me. Come with us, their voices sing, and I slip outside and into their waiting arms.
Finian Burnett, I must have done something right. You have such talented friends. That was amazing. Thank you, Finn.
My pleasure.
Well, you'll be back. Our penultimate reader tonight. Just making sure I did all the reminders I have to do, right? Oh, hey, David. Greg Herron is a New Orleans-based author and editor. My editor, as a matter of fact, the last book I had out, Greg was 4 then, I think. He's the former editor of the Lambda Book Report. He's also co-founder of the Saints and Sinners Literary Festival, which takes place in New Orleans each year, that several of us will be at again, by the way. It's the last weekend in March. So, and we might even do a special, we'll still do it Outspoken from this very room on March 13th, but we may do a special version down out of New Orleans, trying to figure out if that works out logistically. But Greg's the author of a zillion novels, more than 50 short stories, been very involved in the Mystery Writers of America and many other organizations. And I'm really proud to call him my friend. And I can't wait. And again, in 3 months, I'll be down in New Orleans with him. We will just be, have a couple of Sazeracs and Dis. Please welcome Greg Herron.
Well, as my usual thoroughly professional self, I didn't really think about what I was going to read until today. And I forgot about Christmas. So I am reading something that's not very Christmassy, but it's a short story I wrote for an anthology that I was invited to contribute to, that was to celebrate the opening of a bar in North Carolina by a crime writer I knew. And I asked them what they were looking for, and they wanted hard-boiled Southern noir. And I thought, oh, I can do that. And then I asked who else was in the book, and I realized I was the only gay man in the book. And that made me raise my eyebrows. And I just realized the pleasure I took in writing this story to shock straight men is probably why I don't get invited to be in more mainstream crime anthologies. So the name of the story is Moist Money. The United States military trained my father to be a ruthless killing machine in Vietnam, then turned him loose on his hometown of Lester, North Carolina. Me? Yeah, no fucking thanks. Dad was enough military for me, thank you very much, waking me up every morning at 6 a.m., inspecting my room and testing the tightness of the bed with a quarter. He was a drunk by then and a mean one, but he was always up at 6, always smelling like last night's liquor, cigarettes, and whore. I'm paying for college by taking my clothes off for money. A male stripper. A go-go boy, if you prefer. It means I have to watch what I eat, spend a minimum of an hour in the gym almost every day, and get to write off bikinis, underwear, jock straps, and thongs as business expenses. It's a living, okay? My preference is booking gay bars. I like gay bars. Gay men are friendlier and tip better. I make bank when I dance in a gay bar, and it doesn't really require a whole lot of work. Some eye contact, little minor flirting, the occasional touch here and there. Always good for a couple of bucks. The older ones are a lot more handsy than the younger ones, but they also have more cash in their wallets. Bachelorette parties, like the one we're doing tonight, are the fucking worst. The worst. You'd think women would be a lot easier to entertain than gay men, but when you get a bunch of them together without their men, liberally dose them with tequila shots and expensive, brightly colored drinks with umbrellas and cherries skewered on a cutlass, and they turn into a pack of ravening wolves. They do things they'd never let their man suspect they'd do. They like to touch dicks, like to see if they can get you hard, like to see how big you get when you get hard, and then just give you a couple of ones for getting groped like a cheap whore at a dive bar full of sailors. They like to jump on you and wrap their legs around your waist while deep tongue kissing you with their breath smelling like cigarettes and sour liquor and cheap breath mints. They want you to perform for them like a wind-up monkey, and the money is never, ever even close to what you can make in a good, crowded gay bar. You work in a gay bar in Atlanta or New Orleans and DC, wads of sweaty cash shoved into whatever I'm wearing and into my socks and boots. Moist money to flatten out and count and pay the bills after making that deposit on Monday morning. Moist money spends like every other kind. But bachelorette parties, the flat fee for the night, an hour, is $250, and if I'm lucky and they're particularly drunk, I might pick up another 100 in tips. And the whole time I'm fucking hustling, thrusting my hips and dancing like I'm humping one of them, pelvic thrust after pelvic thrust, and moving my hips around in a circle, all while someone is grabbing my ass or tweaking my nipples or groping my dick. At least gay men know to pay extra for that, you know? I was supposed to be off this weekend. I told Clarice at the agency I wanted the weekend off to work on my final paper for my anthropology class. I didn't have a paper due. I just worked every weekend for months, and my roommate was going out of town, and I just wanted to spend the whole weekend by myself. Thank you very much. But one of the other guys got food poisoning, and I said sure, which is why I'm in this car heading for a yokel bar called Yonder, of all things, to entertain some horny women who drank too much and want to act all wild and crazy before going home and passing out in bed with their men whom they haven't fucked in over a week. Woo, fun. Yonder. Who fucking names their bar that? Some fucking hillbilly redneck yokel, that's who. Probably best to keep my sexuality on the down low anyway. Stupid straight women don't like to know the muscular body they're groping would rather be touched by a man anyway. The thing that sucks about the cop uniforms is it's actually against the law to impersonate a police officer, which means we can't get dressed until we're actually there. A couple of the guys a couple of years put on the outfits before they went to the party and got pulled over for a busted taillight and then got run in by a hard-ass little dick deputy with something to prove. Guys with little dicks always have something to prove. So we're going into the bar through that back alley. Ty, who's driving, worked everything out with the bar owner and get dressed in the back office, and then we're going to slip out and come back in through the front door. God, how I hate this stupid cop routine. Ty is good at it, so I'm letting him take the lead. I'll just stand back and slap my nightstick into my palm while he warns them about disturbing the peace. And when he says, I don't know, ladies, that's what we're going to do with you, that's my cue to toss the nightstick aside and rip open my shirt. Seriously, it's so much easier to dance in gay bars than do this stupid routine. And now we're pulling up behind the bar, and Ty is grinning his stupid grin at me. He's straight and he gets off on how women eat up his body. He doesn't mind the worship of gay men, but at least with a female audience, he might get laid. And I wonder for a moment if he ever got that gonorrhea infection cleared up. Not my problem. I grab my bag. He knocks on the back door, tap, 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 and it opens and a young woman waves us in. She's not bad if you like the type, all tits and hips and a little waist and big hair that could probably brush against the bottom of a cloud. And she hustles us into the office. She closes the door behind us and looks up and down like she's deciding which one of us gets the pleasure of her company later. All yours, Ty. All right, she says, her accent thick and honey-drenched, her white teeth slightly crooked in the front, which make her upper lip all pouty. She's looking at Ty, who's taking off his sweatpants. All he has on is a bright yellow thong that looks even brighter and more yellow against his dark tanning salon tan. Oh, she's all his. The hook was in her mouth, and all he has to do is reel her in. She ain't gonna fight the line. All right, she says again, tearing her eyes off the bulge in his thong. They're playing pin the cock on the hump right now. Once they finish, I'm going to give them a round of tequila shots. Your cue to knock on the front door is when I blink the lights out front. Then you pound on the door and I'll answer. I'm already snapping my pants closed and slipping my feet into the back patent leather hop shoes. Let's just get this over with already. I want to get back home away from this bullshit as soon as I can, smoke a joint and chill. The bachelorette's name is Kaylee, she says, pausing at the door to give Ty's ass another look as he bends over to fasten his shoes. Her fiance's name is Brandon, if you want to, bring it up or anything. I freeze as the door shuts behind her. Kaylee? Brandon? Those names have to be a coincidence. But what are the odds? Granted, it seems like everyone these days is named Kaylee or Kayla or Michaela or some variation of that, and Brandons are as common as Mike's used to be, so it had to be a coincidence. It couldn't possibly be Kaylee Lawless and Brandon Perry, could it? Ty is talking to me with a big grin on his face, but I don't hear a word he's saying. My heart is pounding so loudly in my ears I couldn't hear anything. Kaylee Lawless, Brandon Perry. I dreamed of killing them so many times. So many times when I was living in that goddamn juvie, slitting them both from ear to ear with a particularly sharp blade, using a machete to separate their heads from their necks, making Kaylee take a gun barrel into her mouth like she was sucking a dick and pulling her at the trigger while he watched, helpless to do anything as I blew her brains out. I dreamed of breaking every one of his fingers and toes, slowly, carefully, making sure to break them in a way so they wouldn't heal right. Thought about rigging their cars to explode with them inside. I prayed for their deaths, my hate for the two of them slowly shifting from blazing hot to implacable, cold, determined, and dispassionate. Anger is why everyone winds up here, I remember one of the counselors telling me. If the bachelorette was, indeed, Kaylee Lawless, I'd have to remember to stay cool. The odds were against it. I thought again as Ty and I walked around to the front of the building in our cop outfits, hoping no patrol car came by. We stood by the front door of the bar, waiting for the lights to flicker, listening to the screeching cackling of the party inside, Ty's grin getting wider and wider and wider. The lights flicker. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop there. It gets darker.
Oh, Greg, you might be on Santa's naughty list. So. Greg Heron, thank you, Greg. It was great. Our final reader tonight, God, we're moving really quickly, so you can take all the time. Yeah. I actually, he sent me his bio. That is, I'm going to expand on it because humility is not something you find a lot in this business. Even those of us that have earned humility don't express it. But when I asked Chris Bram for a bio, he gave me 2 lines, and I'll read them. But let me start by saying, we're all electronic now, but there was a time when we did mailings, little mailing parties at Curtis Brown, the Curtis Brown offices down on Astor Place in Manhattan. Not many people, and we had a lot of stuff to do, and there was, what you do in a mailing, you stuff the envelopes, you seal the envelopes, you stamp the envelopes. It was a good time to sit around and chat, but it's hard to get, even then, when we had less people on the board, it was hard to get many people there. Anyway, that's my background. Back up to say that 9-10 years ago, maybe, we were at one of these mailing parties, and there was a guy there I didn't know, but I figured I'd figure it out as we went along, and as we're there and everyone's talking, and it finally dawned on me, this is Christopher Bram. He was sitting like right over there, and I'm like a lot of us, Chris, and we, even those that know you now, there's a fanboy thing. You put out such great work over the years, and there he is, just sitting there, gossiping away with everyone else, filling the envelopes, stamping, probably not sealing, because no one likes to seal, so we probably saved him from that. But I guess it's just my way of my first exposure to Chris Bram, which has remained consistent through the years, even as I've slowly gotten over being totally the fanboy per se, although I am, but to get to know Chris as a human being, and just to know that he's there for the writing community, he's there despite a fairly good level of fame, at least as far as it pertains to those of us in the queer writing community, that he's there, his sleeves are rolled up, and he's promoting people all the time. And I'm thrilled he's here tonight, but I'll read you what he sent me. Now, remember, we're talking about all the stuff he's put out over the years, important parts of the literary canon, all the awards he's won. Chris wrote, Christopher Bram is the author of 12 books, including a novel that became the movie Gods and Monsters. He teaches that that it was just coincidence that they just found a book, and although I see they renamed it, though I didn't realize they had renamed the book. Oh, that's okay. Anyway, he teaches at the Galton School of New York University. Please welcome the legendary Christopher Bram. All right.
Yes, I'm humble. I'm so humble. I'm the humblest person in this room. But great to be here tonight. It's be part of this celebration of queer literature, and I had nothing new or Christmassy to read. So I figured I'd read from my own celebration of queer literature, which is the introduction to my book, Eminent Outlaws, which it's as time has gone on, it's maybe the one book I'm proudest of having written. So let me just read to you a few pages from it.
And it's back in print.
And and you've got copies of it, I noticed, which is great. Thank you. Yeah. So okay. So the gay revolution began as a literary revolution. Before World War II, homosexuality was a dirty secret that was almost never written about and rarely discussed. Suddenly, after the war, a handful of homosexual writers boldly used their personal experience in their work. They were surprisingly open at first, then grew more circumspect after being attacked by critics and journalists. But they were followed by other writers who built on what they had initiated. The world was changing, and the new authors could be more open. Their openness produced further change. A third set of writers took even greater liberties, treating their sexuality as equal to straight sexuality, no better and no worse. This book is a history of 50 years of change, shaped by a relay race of novelists, playwrights, and poets. Men who were first treated as outlaws, but are now seen as pioneers and even founding fathers. Their writing was the catalyst for a social shift as deep and unexpected as what was achieved by the civil rights and women's movements. Beginning with figures as different as Gore Vidal, Allen Ginsberg, and James Baldwin, these men are wonderful characters in their own right. Smart, articulate, energetic, ambitious, stubborn, and even brave. They were often brilliantly funny. They were never boring. They can also be competitive, combative, self-destructive, and confused. Their lives were not always exemplary. A career in the arts can make anyone crazy. Quote, "We poets in our youth begin in gladness," wrote William Wordsworth, "but there have come in the end despondency and madness," unquote. But to tell gay stories in the 50s and 60s, and later too, guaranteed further hardship. Not only was it difficult just to get published or produced, but success often led to literary attacks that ran from brutal insult to icy condescension. This is a collection of war stories, but it's also a collection of love stories. There are intense friendships between the writers themselves. There's also a wide variety of sex and romance. These were passionate men who used their desire in different ways, ranging from the fiercely unromantic to the affectionate and vulnerable. Almost all lived in couples at one time or another, but none were monogamous. Gay couples often do openly what many straight couples do in secret. Or as social critic Michael Bronski puts it, gay people are just like straight people, but straight people lie about who they really are. This book is about gay male writers and not lesbian writers. I chose this focus reluctantly, but I needed to simplify an already complicated story. Also, lesbian literature has its own dynamic in history. It needs its own historian. The story of these men has never been told as a single narrative before, which is surprising. Contemporary critics often complain that literature is no longer culturally important, yet it played a huge role in the making of modern gay life. Teachers used to tell us that only bad art is political. Quote, "Thou shalt not commit a social science," wrote W.H. Auden. But I believe that good art can lay the groundwork for social change. Ernest Hemingway, of all people, indicated why when he said a writer must learn to recognize, quote, "what you really felt, rather than what you were supposed to feel and had been taught to feel," which is what all gay people, not just writers, must learn before they can create their own lives. This book is about a few authors who decided to write about what they really felt, even when it made their working life more difficult. A few words about words. I sometimes use gay to describe books and people in times when the word was not yet fully in use. It is preferable to the words that were common then, such as pervert, homo, pansy, faggot. People might argue that a man who called himself a pansy in 1950 had a different identity from one who called himself queer in 1995. But gay people today, no matter what they call themselves, occupy a very broad spectrum of desires, personas, and self-definitions. The names are only approximations anyway. I am primarily a novelist, a gay novelist, but I deliberately left myself out of the story. It would have been impossible to talk about my own work without sounding self-serving. However, my own books can't help casting a shadow. I won't pretend to be objective here. Work that I admire is often work that influenced me, that I feel a kinship with. This is not an all-inclusive, definitive literary history. I do not conclude everyone of value or importance, nor am I putting together a canon of must-read writers. I am writing a large-scale cultural narrative, and I include chiefly those authors who help me tell the story and who offer the liveliest tales. My models were literary histories that mix criticism with biography, social history, good gossip, and a strong point of view. My favorite works in this line include Patriotic Gore by Edmund Wilson, Exile's Return by Malcolm Cowley, and The Great War and Modern Memory by Paul Fussell. Enjoyable in themselves, these books always leave me eager to read or reread a half dozen other books when I am done. I hope this history has the same effect on its readers.
I don't know why I keep putting this damn hat on, but I'm getting my 249. Thanks to everybody who read tonight. Joy Layton, Michael McEwen Bias, Christopher Daines, Finian Burnett, Greg Heron, and Christopher Brand. And also, we will have you back, Nathan Burgoyne and Fiona Riley. Sorry you couldn't join us tonight, but we're thinking of you and dealing with both your issues. I should add, Fiona Riley, just as an aside, has she and her wife have 4 beautiful children. They're all flaming redheads. They're all like little, and going way back, I told Fiona when the first baby came along, I don't remember the girl's name anymore because, I just said, well, her name is Robbie after me, right? now all her kids are Robbies. So I probably should learn the kids' names someday. She's probably gonna go for child support or something, so. This has been great. We will be back here a little over 5 weeks, January 24th. And then again on February 1st for the Nikki Giovanni celebration of her life. And again, every month we're booked, except for April, even in April, actually, we're booked here, but that'll be our finalist reading. Remember that the Publishing Triangle Awards are on Thursday, April 17th. So we'll be doing the finalist readings Tuesday and Wednesday of that week. And I'm sure Rainbow Book Fair will be back in the area too. And April's going to be a month, isn't it? Again? And then we've already booked the days for May and June. Make sure you're on our mailing list so that you get all the information on when we are going to have more events. Remember, they're all free. Please use us as a way to learn more and celebrate more queer literature. So thank you all. Thank you, General Service. Oh, and happy holidays. And I don't have to wear the same. And happy New Year, and may your 2025. We have challenges, but we have challenges, God. But if we all stand together, we can get through this together. So thanks, Greg.
Thank you, everyone.